Oh man, this is such an exciting moment. Everybody trickling in here. We got more. I'm just gonna name you muted me. Ashley and I were talking right before you all came into the waiting room, and we like never get nervous for trainings anymore. We're just like, oh, something will take over and we'll do this training. But this is like one of probably the most vulnerable things we've done, in that this is like really rooted in our own personal stories. And like the nerves are here this time. We were both immediately like, oh, I'm nervous. Oh, my stomach hurts. So I'm just gonna name that energy is here. But we're also just really grateful to be able to share. It's been a while since we shared in this format of a masterclass too.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done a free masterclass, like a long time. So this is exciting to be able to share space with so many people and offer so much value, as we always do. You know, it doesn't matter if it's paid or not. We just we always go all in. So pretend like you paid for this, because the energy exchange will be there.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Don't worry, we don't know how to leave the mask on, so thanks for your permission to remove any and all masks. And Alicia, no worries, it will be recorded, and so you'll get the recording. But thank you for being here and sharing this face-to-face time with us while you can.
Carolyn, this is the training I was talking about that we'll be using you as an example. So
yeah, oh, and Carolyn,
here's Carolyn.
Great. Okay. So Ashley, I can keep admitting if people keep arriving, if you want to start us off.
Yes, I do. Okay, let me pull up my notes. I got a light outline here, which I will share with you all, because this training, as we had shared, is for the, the critical thinkers, the logical, cerebral, empathic beings that I know that structure is super helpful and support you in like staying focused and knowing what's to come. So I will be sharing that. But before I do, just wanted to welcome you all. Hi, welcome. So nice to connect with you and see you and just share space with you here. I'm really grateful for all of you that are able to join live with us, and for all of you that are watching the replays. So happy that you're taking time, the sacred pause, to be with this container, even if you weren't able to join live. So before we go into the content, I think it's really important, probably imperative, that Alissa and I introduce ourselves, since we will be sharing parts of our story. So Alissa, do you want to go first this time?
Sure.
Just change it up.
First. Yeah. So hey, y'all. For any of you though who don't know me, I know there's quite a few, like I said, faces I'm used to seeing here. But I'm the lead facilitator in Ashley's signature program, Activate Your Life's Purpose. And I do a lot of other facilitation. I just kind of pop up everywhere in Ashley's business, which is wonderful. I'm currently doing conscious leadership sessions inside the Purpose Accelerator program that comes like post AYLP, which I have to say is some of the most difficult work I've ever done, and really fulfilling at the same time. My background is in behavioral psychology. I did a lot of applied behavior analysis work, and then I migrated into doing rites of passage work in wilderness and horticultural therapy, which is where Ashley and I met as facilitators on the island of Hawaii. So we've been doing this work together in different capacities for a long time. I did take sort of a long break, which I will talk about in my story today, about that sort of journey in self-reclamation and self-recalibration. And now I'm going to school to get my licensure and master's in transpersonal therapy. So I bring a lot of that to what I do already as well. And yeah, it's sort of ingrained in my own purpose and my own journey. So you'll hear about that today too. Ashley?
Yay, still nervous. How weird is this? It's been a while. Actually, I'm going to invite this in, just get excited about the fact that I'm nervous, because that means I'm going to be sharing some things that I haven't really shared yet. So introducing myself. Hello, I know a lot of you already know me, and I've already worked with a lot of you, but for those that are new to my world, hi, I'm Ashley Dufresne. I am a master channel, energy alchemist, and life's purpose mentor, and I blend my magic and gifts with spirituality in my background. My formal background is psychology, to help empaths in business gain clarity and confidence and to rise into the highest expression of themselves. And I do this inside of Actualize Purpose, and I support those businesses flourish and anchor more deeply into their purpose and just really shine their light out into the world inside of the Purpose Accelerator Mastermind. So what you'll hear in my story is my background is also in clinical mental health. I come from very logical, need some finite answers, linear thinking. And so as I was reflecting on my story over the last couple of days, it's kind of mind blowing, just the complete shift in how I function and how I, go minute to minute, day by day, from how I used to function and exist, being really anxious, diagnosed with OCD. My calendar is set up minute to minute, everything's scheduled in, everything's very I'm a Virgo, by the way, that still exists, but I lead so much more with my intuition and flow and feeling, where before it was all logic and what made sense and needed finite answers, mathematical, and it's just, wow, what a journey it's been. And I'm really excited to be sharing that process with you all and how to move out of the head and into the body and really be leading life in a more systematic way, using all of ourselves to move forward and living our purpose, and not just staying in one single linear way of thinking and existing. So that's a little bit about us. We will be sharing at the end how you can work with us. Of course, we're going to be talking about our programs, because what we're going to be sharing here is absolutely just, in the depths of what we do. And it's kind of hard to not explain a bit more and where we dive more into the stuff and where we teach and how we guide people. But before I go into the outline, I want to just ensure that everybody is here is going to benefit the most from this. So Alissa, do you want to speak on who would benefit the most from this masterclass?
Sure. So as Ashley said, we wind up drawing in obviously empaths, but a lot of really cerebral empaths, a lot of really logical empaths. And you'll hear in our story that there's a reason why, right? We transmute our medicine through our own story as a way of facilitating others along their path too. And so you'll see that reflected back here in us. But we really are here for those who are meant to lead and who are stuck in maybe the fear cycle that may live in our bodies, that may live in our mind, etc. And that are sort of overcome by the logic of ego, which we'll talk about how to identify, because it's funny once you sort of know the nuance of ego, just how non-logical ego actually is, but how easy it is to sort of get trapped in that. So we'll also sort of talk about how to get unstuck in that ability to identify, what does the soul sound like? What does the ego sound like? So if you're having trouble differentiating those things, then you're in the right place, because we'll talk about that nuance as well. And even for the folks who already know their purpose, we know that there's a big difference, right, between knowledge and embodiment, right? There's a big gap between knowledge and wisdom. And so if you're sort of feeling that I know my purpose, I know it deeply, I'm passionate about it, it comes out all the time, I'm always talking about it, but I'm having a hard time actualizing. We're going to talk a bit about what that difference really looks like, because I think it's really hard to know what you are or aren't doing if we can't identify really what is the lived difference of these things. So then you're in the right place if you're looking for that as well. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that covers it. Yeah.
Also, you're in the right place if you're an AYLP alum and you're looking to get back into the frequency of this. I see you here. Thank you for being here. We talk all the time in AYLP about how this is a drill. Like we keep coming back to this work to keep embedding it in our own frequency. So thank you for continuing to do the work. I never doubted any of you.
Right? Instill it in. This work will never end. Yeah, the only thing I would add is, it's definitely for the person who knows that they're here to be leading something so much bigger. They know that they're supposed to be making an impact on the planet and helping people, and maybe just haven't figured out how to fully step into that and express that to its fullest capacity, and feels like there are aspects of themselves or their mind or their beliefs that have been holding them back from actualizing their purpose to the fullest expression. So I think that's the only thing I would add to it, but yeah, that's it. So
can I say one thing about why we're storytelling here today as well?
Yes.
Is this the time? Okay.
Yeah.
So we've sort of been called throughout the past few months that folks that are coming into our realm want to hear our story more. So that's relevant. We're answering that call. But on a deeper level, on a rites of passage level, and on a sort of like collective ascension level, we know that, or science knows, I'll get to that in a second, but science has proven that when we storytell, neurologically, the storyteller and the receiver, their neurology matches, which means the person that's storytelling is helping to facilitate new neural pathways and new connections to be formed in the brain of the person who is receiving. And that's huge because we know that it's hard to develop the physical landscape, literally, of what new possibility is in this logical, ego-driven system. Now, energetically and spiritually, we know this, we've known this exists for a really long time. It takes a little while for science to catch up, but we can do those studies and see that that's what's happening. And so there's a real medicine in storytelling. We know, again, on a rites of passage and like ritualistic, ceremonial way, and ancestors have done this for eons in order to help the collective ascend. And so this is more than just an opportunity to get to know more about us, although I think that's a beautiful thing. But it's really this opportunity to connect as a collective and to have that realm of possibility open up on an energetic, neurological, systematic level as whole beings. Okay, that's my mini TED Talk.
I love it. I know everyone here is drawn to this training, also loves that. So thank you. Oh my goodness. Oh, so good. Okay, so outline. As you know, we'll be sharing our stories. We're going to be speaking on how to move through fear and how to navigate the voice, the ego, and identify it as it comes up and navigate it as you meet your edge to take the leap and move past what's comfortable to your mind and allow your body or your feeling or your soul to lead you. That leads into 2. We'll be teaching on how to identify the voice of your soul, how to hear it and know that it's the voice of your soul versus, paranoia, fear, ego, old stories, and how to turn your inner fire into your guiding light. And 3, we will be teaching and sharing how to live with your soul leading the way. Really live a soul-led life and to actualize your purpose, and how you can work with us in undergoing that journey and how to experience the magic that has changed so many lives. And then for last thing, stay till the end because we are going to have a live Q&A. If you're able to stay to the end, do it because this is your opportunity to ask your questions and receive some mentorship here, some free mentorship. And so if questions come up during this, please take note of them, write them down, and then post them in the chat when we do the Q&A, so then they're all up and we can just go through them and really be efficient and be able to support everyone in the time that we have. And then I will be sharing an opportunity with you all that I am only offering here, exclusive opportunity for those here only, and I'll be sharing that at the end too. So I'm excited to share that with you. And we're ready to begin. Okay.
You're going first. You're definitely going first. You're not doing this to me.
I could see you already going. All right, I'm going first. Okay, so I have, since this had channeled in, which by the way, Alissa, I think you touched on this a little bit, that the community has been craving more of this. I actually, with every enrollment that I do of any program, I channel in the collective, the consciousness of the collective and what they ask for and what they would like to see. And this was what channeled in, was not just this masterclass, but what was really clear was the collective wanted to hear our stories and to know where we came from, to relate deeper on the journey so they can feel safe in taking the step forward and knowing that like they're walking beside people who have been there and know what they're going through and know that they will guide them in the way that their soul has been and craving. So this is very much channeled, and we're here because, well, my guides told me to be, and so did your guides. So we're here showing up. All right, so I didn't write down my story. I've just been reflecting on it for the last week, of what parts of my story I feel would be the most supportive in sharing. And so I have two parts of it that I think will be kind of eye-opening in a way to get to know me more, but also in a relatable way that I feel that a lot of our students can relate. And I assume that you being here will probably be able to relate to and support you in navigating maybe some things that you're going through. So the guides said, yeah, always, it's kind of the way I navigate most things in my life. It's just what my guides tell me what to do, which is so different than what it used to be. And I guess I'll start there. So Ken already explained it. I have always been, and I should say I was always a person who really needed finite answers and clear logical guidance before making any decision. I think this was probably rooted in, I was raised in a pretty like hectic household, you know, pretty typical, I think, for like empaths who choose this life. And I was super anxious, and before they really knew what OCD was, I, was later diagnosed with OCD, but was struggling as a kid with OCD and control issues, serious control. And OCD was my way that it kind of manifested into my life in a physical way of me trying to reclaim some control, feeling so out of control. And that continued on through my adolescence. And I, did some exposure therapy and supported myself in moving out of that using psychology and, behavioral psychology to support myself. But pretty much the way I navigated my entire life and how I approached everything was from a very logical standpoint. Everything had to make sense. It had to have backing behind backing, and I couldn't move forward with anything. I mean, I was literally paralyzed from making any decision until I felt like there was a sound reason before doing it. It's pretty excessive, And I think that kind of also coincides with OCD, of just that really compulsive thoughts and repeated, like just needing of control and understanding. So this was something that continued on through all of my childhood, I'd say, and adolescence. And this process, I mean, it made me thrive in like school because I loved math and science. Like that is where I sought comfort. I'm like, math, great. There's a finite answer. I get this. This makes sense. Why? And I remember thinking that at school, like, man, I really don't like English and history and like these like philosophy. Like it could be anything. I'm like, I just really love in math. There is one answer. You're either right or you're wrong. How great is that? How comfortable is that to know that there is just one way? And I just thrived in it. I loved it. I loved math. I loved chemistry, and anything that I could find a clear answer just felt so rewarding. It felt so easy. It felt very comfortable. So comfortable. And I use that word and I emphasize that word because our ego feels very comfortable when there's some backing to it. We can feel safe in moving forward and making decisions when we have a really finite answer. And intuition and like woo-woo and spiritual stuff doesn't feel safe because there's no sound reason to it. It doesn't really make sense. So sharing all that with you of how I functioned in my life, Let me just throw in the mix that I have been a channel and a medium my whole life. So I have been speaking to spirits since I was a kid and having interesting, unexplained experiences my whole life, and felt so uncomfortable with it, which is why I actually think probably I like leaned more into the logical stuff, because it was the space where I could find comfort. Because when it came to just like my experience of experiencing ghosts speaking to me, or other people's guides channeling to me, or just having like scary supernatural experiences, I felt so unsafe. It was so uncertain. I felt, I've had nightmares. I still have some nightmares, times me losing control and things, moving, and like ghosts kind of being in control of my space, and me being helpless because I don't know what to do or how to help myself in this. So I really do think having those spiritual experiences at a young age and not having clear guidance or a family that really understood just really made me lean more on my logical side, because that's where I felt safe and secure, and there was some finite security and answers there. So I tried to avoid my gifts for, well, I feel like every sensitive child is just like, hey, how can I avoid this? How can I pretend this just isn't real, because it doesn't make any sense? So I definitely played that one for a while until my guides were just like, all right, you're 18. You're an adult now. No more fucking around. We're going to just mess some stuff up for you. And they sure did. And the more I clinged to reason, the more I clinged to rationalizing my experiences, the crazier the things got. Like unexplained, I felt like I was going full blown crazy. Yeah, the whole 9 yards. That was 18, 19, continued. I mean, I clearly have what is that? I like to see resilience. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, you're resilient. Yeah, you can handle a lot. Also, you're resilient, so it takes you a lot more to make a change in your life. You had to endure a lot more pain before you're like, okay, maybe I can make a change here now that I've just like felt so much hurt and pain and fear. So yeah, some examples of some of the scary things that were happening, how crazy it got was I would be like in my kitchen and the garbage disposal would turn on, or like, objects would move, or the same song that I like told my friend that makes me feel really calm and relaxed would just like play on repeat on my like mixed playlist. Just weird things, and like seeing stuff and stuff moving, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like my just common line I shared with everyone was, I think I'm going crazy, but this just happened. And eventually it got just so extreme that people that I would hang out with would start seeing things too with me. And so I'm like, oh good, I'm actually not going crazy, because they're starting to see it too. So that brought some relief and some just validation to my experience, because it was really hard to believe anything that was going on, because there was no logic. I mean, I would try to come up with reasons like, oh, well, maybe I turned the garbage disposal on and I just like blacked out for a second. Or maybe I moved that and just forgot. Or, oh, maybe it's just like mathematically this song is playing because, I don't know. I would just come up with reasons for everything. And like, what a perfect example of how I was moving through just logic and just refused to accept that there was more out there than what I could come up with in my mind. And how it totally kept me stuck in this tunnel vision. And my guides really did everything in their power to break those walls down. Like, hey, you're still in your tunnel vision. I swear there's more. Yeah, I know you feel it. Yeah, those gifts are real. Let me just keep throwing stuff at you until something clicks. And so eventually I broke. I think I just had to have like a total mental breakdown. And that was, I think, enough. I think I really kind of needed to have that breakdown for me to finally like release my control of everything and my belief that I know everything, and to really surrender up to the possibility that there's something more that's beyond my understanding. And finally, when I surrendered into that, it felt like I could finally be in ease. I could finally be in ease, and I could finally experience some safety in the unknown, in the spiritual, in the completely unexplainable by all logic and reason, which seemed crazy at the time. But yeah, so I'm going to save the second part of my story of like how I started navigating my purpose, maybe until after you speak on yours, because I feel like that kind of goes into the later stuff of what I started, awakening my purpose. What do you think?
Oh, I didn't know I was unmuted. I was like, what? Yeah, that's fine with me if you want to do it that way. We'll see what feels right when it comes to me talking about my purpose. I'll talk about a little from the get-go. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing all of that. I've known it, but I love just having that sort of like energetic relation and watching that happen between you and other folks. So thank you. So I'm going to be talking about some bodily trauma that has to do with illness. And before I do that, I wonder if y'all would be willing to do a little practice with me in the spirit of co-creating a safe environment for that to happen for all of us. Are you all interested in that? Okay. So we'll stand up in a minute, but we're all just going to stand up and shake really hard for a minute. This is one of my favorite practices because it works on the evolutionary level. You might notice your dog shakes when it gets really nervous. That's literally an energetic process to diffuse the storage of trauma in the fascia. And humans lost that along the way, so we have to do it ourselves. And we'll come back to this bit about safety in my story, but the best way to do it is to make yourself shake until all of a sudden your body just takes over. And you'll notice like, oh, there's this visceral mechanism that does it. And that's you tapping into like the natural system of your body. So y'all ready to do that? We'll just do it for a minute to create sort of the safe energy, and then we'll get into my story. Cool. So stand up. And when you're ready, I like to I'll do this so you can see my legs. I just like start here. And then it just happens. Keep shaking, move it. Let it take over. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. So I want to tell this. Oh, it feels, the energy moves, right? So I want to tell this story specifically because we're talking about embodiment. And when we talk about the ego and the logic, it usually runs on fear, right? And I'll get to that a little bit more, but when we have real reasons to be afraid to be in our body, it can be really hard to break out of that logic cycle. And that may be some of what's preventing us from actualizing, right? From embodying our purpose. So that's my story, which is that I too was incredibly logical. I'm still pretty logical, but my ego isn't the loudest voice anymore. My logic isn't the loudest voice anymore. So I too have a clinical, I love this practice because it makes me have to slow down, right? My breath is like, okay. So I have a clinical mental health background. I knew for a long time that my soul's mission, okay, not my purpose, my soul's mission was to be of service to folks who were suffering. And so I lived in different capacities. I worked in different capacities of that for a really long time. I worked for Center for Disability Services. I worked with folks with autism. I worked horticultural rites of passage, which was working with folks with really complex mental health issues and coming out of addiction and coming out of abuse. So I knew that I was supposed to be of service to folks who were suffering. But as an empath who themselves had experienced trauma, I had a real need for holding and setting boundaries. I didn't know how the fuck to do that. And so living in this capacity of being in service to others was really detrimental, with only using the logical mind, but feeling so much viscerally. And so I really quick hit a brick wall with that. And around the same time, entered into a really toxic relationship with an alcoholic. And if you're an empath, you probably know that it's real easy to have core wounding around gaslighting, because people are used to saying, that's not what's happening. That's not real. That doesn't exist. Compound that with an alcoholic is gaslighting on X Games mode. It's constant negating your reality. So between the lack of boundaries I had in my job that was fulfilling my soul's mission, not in the most fulfilling way, and not in a way that could be embodied, because I was receiving so much and unable to hold that and stay in alignment. But I was also in this situation that was constantly draining my energy, right? And the only thing I could think to do was logic my way out of it. Well, this work just isn't for me. I can't do this. I can't sustain it. I can't be of service to people. I'm not enough. I'm the unhealthy one. I can't, be in a healthy relationship. These things are my fault. So fast forward a little bit of a lot of that, right? And believe it or not, my body started reacting in a way that perpetuated this idea that I was very unsafe. And so I developed an autoimmune disorder, say it like that, because to me, my autoimmune issues and my trauma are not separatable. They exist in the same realm. From an extreme overwhelm on my system of trying to remain logical and trying to stay outside of my body, because this was chaotic, and because I did not know how to read its signs or cues or what I was receiving elsewhere that said, no, get out, you can leave that relationship. No, go take time for yourself and grow personally so that you know how to set these boundaries with clients, etc. No, what you're experiencing energetically is real, right? All of these messages are coming in, but it's unsafe for me to be there at the time, right? So that's a pretty powerful story around why would I ever try to move towards embodiment if my embodied existence was actually feeling unsafe, right? So to be, and I'm going to talk about it more, so to be able even to approach embodiment and actualization meant that a huge transformation had to happen, right? So in that time of, I'll say, extreme instability, which was actually me just sort of like perpetuating this roller coaster of chaos because I only wanted to go towards the logic, right? Which was not, that's where I say the ego is not necessarily logical, because staying in a abusive partnership is not exactly logical, right? But the ego is fearful of what it doesn't know. So it keeps you safe in what you know. So in that, I decided that what I needed was just stability. I needed stability. I needed something constant. I needed something less draining on my energy, which was all probably somewhat true, but I sought it in really conventional ways that actually perpetuated this idea that what I was experiencing wasn't real or wasn't good enough, etc. So I went to work an insurance job, a desk job, an insurance job. Nothing wrong with insurance or anyone who works in insurance, but a far cry from this being of service to people who are suffering, right? Being behind a desk was stable. Being in a constant 9 to 5 was stable, right? That's the stability I needed. However, it continued to perpetuate this idea of all of the emotionality I was feeling wasn't real, because now I lived in a logical world of numbers and probability and selling people whatever they needed for their cars or whatever else, right? So empath energy, that didn't exist. That wasn't real, to the point where like that was really gaslit a lot in my job, in my career, and with the people that I worked with, and kept perpetuating this idea of fear. But logically, I needed it because it was stable, right? So what can I say? Hold on, let me pause. So it wound up being perpetuated so far to the point where my body reacted so bad that I was in the hospital 5 times in a month with severe allergic reactions, which was actually like extreme inflammation. That was, and if you guys know what anaphylactic shock is, it's like a life-threatening allergy. And it would happen when I would have this like really intense emotional disconnect between what I felt was real in my body and what was real in the external agreed upon world of logic. And like Ashley, a lot of times this resilience, right, that we glorify, it makes it allows us to take a lap before we make a change. And this other thing about resilience is that when we over glorify it and we have that narrative about our reliance on resilience, we also believe that everything has to be hard, right? And so that was my belief. And so it had to be really hard for me to make a move. And at this time, I wholeheartedly believed like there was no synchronicity around me. There was nothing else for me. Nothing I was experiencing was anything but me being very crazy, because that was the most logical thing. And it wasn't until I really, actually serendipitously, right? There's no signs around me, but Ashley had popped up on a feed of mine, and I haven't seen her in a few years, offering her Empowered Empath course. And I was like whole body was like, no, don't do it. And I was like, Ashley, I'm doing it. Because eventually we have to like step out of this ego loop. And we'll talk about ways to do that in a little while. But all of a sudden, all these synchronicities started flooding back. All of this stability started to look not like stability. It started looking like complacency. It started looking like soul death, which would have been a really easy reason for my body to react that intensely, because my realities just didn't match. My internal reality and my logical, society-driven reality didn't match. And so, of course, the system starts throwing a fit until it's so extreme that you have to move forward. So I'll talk about some of the components that like set me in alignment with coming back to being like, I'm of service, and like I've never been of service in a greater capacity now, between Ashley's programming and being in school to be a therapist and running programming for a university. There's a lot that I'm doing right now that would not have been possible if I continued to live in that logic, ego, fear-driven, however, very somewhat reasonable response, right, to being fearful of being in my body. But had I kept living in that, this sort of thing would not be possible. Like I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So Ashley, I'll let you talk about your purpose, and then I want to talk about specifically the rites of passage that get us from our ego to our soul.
Okay, I'll make sure to leave that open there for you. So 18, that's where I ended off. It's the final moment where I accepted the knowing of my soul's mission, which I've always knew my whole life. And at 18, I really understood what my purpose was. And it was terrifying to take any action on it. But at the point where I was at, it was like the pain that I was in was greater than the fear of taking the leap. So I took the leap, and manifested really quickly my internship in my like dream career, which was art therapy. And right out of college, that internship became my career. And that was my first 20, I started my career in clinical mental health at a substance use facility for adolescents, directing art therapy, and started doing energy healing. I was guided into that, and man, that navigating that was, I think, what really helped me start to open up and begin to differentiate and hear what it was that fear was saying and ego was saying, and how that felt in my mind and body, and what it felt like to channel more clearly, and what it felt like to hear my soul and to be guided by something deeper. And I do feel that the combination of me working more of the clinical side with like having this opportunity to like lead meditations and do Reiki, like doing those side by side, really gave me that space to hear both of those and to see that one isn't necessarily better than the other, but having that like wider approach to making change was where I was seeing change with my clients. And I knew I wasn't able to make quite the impact that I wanted to there. And I moved forward into moved to Hawaii and began the rites of passage work there. But it was on this journey of awakening my purpose that I noticed that I started to, even with that, create a mathematical formula and how I was going to create this. I was like, all right, so I want it to be fulfilling, I want it to be joyful, let's try this out. So like a lot of empaths, I started in a career that, it was aligned to a degree with my purpose, but it was energetically draining. I was not getting paid what I was really putting into it. I wasn't like really able to help my students, my clients, the depth that I wanted to. And man, like quite frankly, because it was in substance abuse, it was very triggering for me, and it would trigger me in ways that were really unkind and would send me into spirals of just like of old disempowering behaviors that would send me off. And I'm like, wow, I'm doing this work to help others, and like I am falling apart here. Like, am I really mentally capable of holding space for anyone right now? And so that was my attempt at living the most fulfilling, and felt so burnt out. I'm like, yeah, making some change here, but gosh, it's out of self-sacrifice. I'm sacrificing my well-being. I'm sacrificing, even making enough money to do this. I'm sacrificing my happiness, and like I am energetically drained and I am triggered like all of the time. And so I was like, all right, time to switch gears here. I'm going to go into full play mode. I want to live the most joyous life. And this journey did not take very long to come to an end, but I was like, all right, I'm quitting everything and I am ditching all of it, and I am heading to Yosemite, and I am becoming a climbing bum. So after I graduated and I spent some time in the substance use facility, I dropped everything and literally lived in a tent cabin and just rock climbed all day and worked a couple hours in the evening, just enough to like get some free food from the Yosemite Grill and, make enough money to pay for my tent cabin, my bills. And like, that was my life. And really, it didn't take long. I was like, wow, I am really unfulfilled. I feel like I'm living a pretty selfish life here. Yeah, this is great. I get to climb all the time and be in nature and like really live for myself and be in my joy. But wow, I feel like a lot's missing. A lot's missing. It really did not. It took less than 3 months before I felt it within the first month. And finally, after a couple months more, I was like, all right, time to go back. And so I was like, okay, check. Step 1, most fulfilling. Wow, I feel drained. This isn't working. Step 2, most joyous. Okay, wow. This is just living for myself, not working. And I realized that I was still leading my life out of logic. And I wasn't really leading with my soul. And although I would get glimpses of things, it was hard for me to trust it. It's hard for me to believe it when there was no backing behind it. There was no reason behind it. Like, these things made sense. Okay, that's fulfilling. That's a career. That looks credible. How cool is it that I'm leading art therapy, right out of college? And oh, wow, I'm a rock climbing bum. I get to be dirtbag and have fun and have no responsibilities. This makes sense. Like, this sounds like a good plan. And it was really at that point where I was at the crossroads where I'm like, okay, there's something more here. There's greater depths that I'm not seeing because I'm not letting myself experience reality out of my mind. Even though I'm channeling and even though I'm doing energy healing, I'm still stuck here. I'm still stuck here. And it honestly, I think it was the move to Hawaii that took me completely out of my comfort. And there was no logic anymore. And my body took over. My body took over. And this is when the knowledge and the understanding that I was beginning to get in the substance abuse facility of like those two kind of connecting, like, oh, here's intuition, here's my channeling, oh, and here's logic, and like, here's the formula of like how to support somebody in like recovery. Getting to Hawaii really allowed me to move that knowledge into wisdom, where I began to hear the voice of fear and then hear and feel what my body wanted. I began to learn how to identify the soul, the voice of the soul. And the soul speaks to us in our body, not in our head, not the way we think, not the way we process, not the logical formula thing that makes the most sense. Our soul speaks us through our bodies. So that's how you can hear it. It's this deeper pull, this deeper knowing that the more you give it time and attention, the stronger it gets. And on that journey of like navigating nowhere land where I knew no one, knew nothing, didn't know the space, all I had was my intuition and my soul, I finally could feel safe in that. Because there was no longer logic that could lead me, because I literally didn't know anything. There's no longer, like, the ego was all well past that edge. So off that edge that it was like, we are screwed here. We need to retreat now, get off this island. Oh my God. And yeah, really the trials that got thrown at me in that time were absolutely warranting to just like book it, just get out. But I just knew I needed to be there. And the pull there was from my soul. And it made it so much easier for me to trust my soul in navigating that. So moving through fear and navigating the voice of the ego when you're at the edge. This is first step for sure. Because how can we possibly create room for our soul if we are completely in our head and like completely under the spell of the ego's voice? There's no room there. And so moving out of fear and navigating the voice of the ego is giving yourself permission to take that pause, to hear and recognize what is happening up here, and to give yourself permission to sink into somewhere deeper within you. To say, hey, I know I hear you and this makes sense, and I know there's something more. I know I have inner wisdom waiting to speak that has a more profound, wider lens of guidance that I couldn't possibly have come up with my logical mind or with my ego. Because the ego, I don't think we went over this yet, the ego pulls from what we've done before and what we've seen before. That's it. Our soul, it moves beyond that. It's beyond the third dimension, beyond our experience. So it can give us a wider lens, a wider perspective, and a more aligned guidance that will help move us in the direction that we are truly, our soul is being pulled to. And the more we honor the voice, even in the smallest acts, the smallest things, the more we're building trust in that. The more we're building safety in that. And I know, Alissa, you'll want to touch on that. But the more we're actually strengthening and making it louder. This process is turning down the voice of the ego and turning up the voice of the soul. And that comes through giving ourselves permission to even just the smallest nudges, like, what do I want to eat today? Okay, what way do I want to go to work? Okay, what way do I, like, who do I want to call? Whatever, just the smallest little things. Every little thing is like a slight edge. Every little thing builds up and strengthens it, strengthens our belief in it, strengthens our trust in it, strengthens the voice of it, and makes the tips of scale and makes it easier for us to live a more soul-led life. Thanks for that. All right, Alyssa. Perfect segue. Good sneezing my way into.
Be gone, ego. Achoo. Okay, so I took a bunch of notes that I want to say on ego so that we can give you some concrete methodology around identifying the voice of the ego versus the voice of the soul. And I want to talk about some really imperative aspects of rites of passage that bring us from that place of maybe knowing or experiencing or getting the hint to having really the energy that it takes to actually embody and live that out and take action steps towards it. So like I said, that can be really hard because we truly all have our own wounding. Your wounding won't be mine. It won't be Ashley's, or maybe it will be. Maybe there's an aspect of it that you relate to. But our wounding often keeps us out of the body, which, as Ashley said, is how the soul communicates. And logically, it's going to ego is going to make it really easy and enticing to continue to stay away from the soul's beckoning in the body because it's unsafe, right? That's where our trauma lives, literally on like a level of the limbic brain, and which we'll talk about. It literally lives there. And so we have to do certain things to be able to create this opening, this spaciousness for it, which Ashley sort of touched on, right? There's no room for it if so much of our capacity is already taken up by ego. So a few things. The ego will basically, I can't even say it because it's too typical to the ego. The ego speaks in always and never. I was going to say the ego always speaks in always and never, which is just so redundant. But the ego speaks in always and never terms, right? I think intuitively we know this because we see it take us for a ride. And the only way it can take us for that ride is if it is indefinite, right? It is the last word. Like Ashley said, it is turned all the way up. And how much room is left from always and never, right? No room, none at all. There's no room for nuance. And the ego is not nuanced, which is perfect because if you really want to test if it's ego or not, if you have the awareness and the capacity to catch it when it comes up, which is really difficult, and you question it, and it's broken down by one thing conflicting that always and never, is probably ego, right? If there's more nuance to the argument, it's probably ego, because that's the only way ego knows how to function. So ego operates on always and never, really, really harsh judgment around should or should not. And this is because primarily it also operates on this idea of roles and rules. Okay, so your role in society, your role to your family, your role to your partner, rules in society, rules that say that your purpose only has to do with a career and not to your deepest desire, which is a big one that folks coming into AYLP often make, right? That our purpose is somehow for money making specifically and not for us. So roles and rules, a lot of times this is where the egos come up. Ego comes up. Just reading my notes because this is important stuff. That also means that it's, so this is one distinction between the soul, which we'll get to in a second, and the ego, is that the ego is easily bypassed because right now it is probably the baseline, right? It's logical, logical again. So it just makes sense. And so you think it, it's there, it's running the show, easily bypassed. Simultaneously, intense focus on that story will leave you spiraling. These two things specifically are really, really different from the voice of the soul, the source, or the spirit, whatever you want to call it. Specifically because, okay, so then we know that the ego is illogical, but when you have a tight grip, easily bypassed, but when you have a tight grip on it, it will leave you spiraling further and further into it. For the soul, it's viscerally felt, but it's easily arguable. You all know this. How many times have you argued your own soul's pull? Easily arguable, but viscerally, like ecstatic almost, right? Viscerally felt. The other thing is that intense focus or control over it will make it go silent. This is a huge difference. Why? Because the soul cannot be understood through cognition and logic. And so when you move towards applying that mechanism, again, of the ego to the soul, it's gone. Whereas if you apply that to ego, you're gone. You're gone. You're spiraling. That's all that exists now, right? So there are some really clear differences here. Like Ashley said, it exists in the body. The ego resides in the mind, although it can trigger traumas, which can look really tricky because then the body does what? Reacts. So we have to open up our capacity to be able to really better hear these things and better identify with these things. And there is a process that we can do that through, which comes to the rites of passage. So something that the ego is really good at is isolating us. Why? Why is it so good at isolating us? Because it deeply fears, right? It's here to keep you safe. It deeply fears the unknown. And the potential that your desires have to unlock you to are deeply unknown and again, aren't logical. So it isolates us because those resonant beings that are aligned with you naturally draw out your purpose. It's almost impossible not to have your purpose, your soul's mission come up in some way to brilliant people who are reflecting it to you. It's just a natural process. It's one of the reasons why for so long we lived in tight communities that ascended together. And only recently has even our idea of spirituality and our growth model separated us, which is actually really detrimental because it's keeping us stuck in this ego of betterment and grind rather than connection, collective ascension, and the way that energies of other people literally draw out your purpose. So this is like the first really important part of the rites of passage to be able to understand this, is having a reflective community that's aligned with you. Again, the ego says, no, do it alone. It's got to be hard. You have to do it in isolation. And so does trauma. Trauma says that too. There wasn't a moment that I was sick that I wasn't thinking, no one will understand. I'm sick and alone. Right? So these things are operating on the same principle, because healing, ascension, fulfillment is so much more easily accessed by one another. We're conduits for each other. So that's incredibly important. The next thing, give me a minute, I literally have so many notes here. The next thing, yeah.
Can you speak on, in the part one, in moving from fear and navigating the voice of the ego, how, like why this is the perfect first step and why this is necessary as like the first step, like why we set up things, because I think it might be a good way of just like creating a process.
Yeah.
Of, like,
so that's kind of my next thing. That's kind of my next thing. So one of the reasons why that's so important in creating the first step is because it's also the easiest way to create a container of safety. And if we don't have a container of safety, we can't create the openness to receive from the soul. Again, trauma, woundings, everything else will have a visceral reaction in our being that says that we're unsafe, and it creates a literal energy of repulsion. So we can't absorb what is ours through abundance, what is ours through manifestation, or what our soul's pull is, if we don't have some sort of container of safety created. And that's so much more easily accessible, again, with resonant beings who are going to reflect our light and who are going to traverse this path along with one another. We lived evolutionarily in herds for a reason, because it was safe. So there's an evolutionary mechanism within us that says, group, my body can relax. Vigilance can relax. maybe you don't think so, because empaths have a lot of trauma around absorbing other people's shit, which is why it's so important to traverse this path with other people traversing this path who are also holding sacred boundaries, who are also showing up and reciprocating what you're bringing to the group as well. Because we literally don't have the spaciousness if our whole system says repel, 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 which is also something that's often taught to empaths, right? Guard yourself, don't let anything in, right? When we're in that container of safety and community, it literally isn't necessary. So being trauma informed around this is absolutely imperative, which is why Ashley and I bring so much of like this clinical mental health program, clinical mental health background to any of the programs that we facilitate, because if there's no use in someone paying for a program if their state is going to be that of repulsion because we haven't created a safe container for them. So that is the first and foremost action of you need a community. You need people around you reflecting you so that we can break this idea of isolation, because also your purpose probably isn't meant to be spent in isolation. So how are you going to cultivate it in isolation? Right? So safety, being trauma informed is the second thing. These are the two most important steps because they're going to open you to be able to be receptive and mindful of when the ego is coming up and when the soul is coming up. Until then, autopilot baseline has to keep running. It has to keep running because it has to keep you safe on an individual level because you're isolated. You have to do it on your own, and you need to keep running on the system in order to keep it safe because viscerally, that's what you're feeling. This is one of the first things that changed my literal physical wellness when I entered Empowered Empath with Ashley, is suddenly I had a resonant community. I had people that were witnessing my experience when for so long, my internal experience was not reflected in my external reality and was causing so much chaos and so much suffering. So that community made it so much safer for me to see signs, for me to recognize synchronicity, for me to be witnessed in all that was transforming, for me to have a sounding board around, wait, that sounds like the ego. That sounds like the ego. That doesn't sound like your soul. And finally, I had a safe space of other empaths who weren't going to gaslight me when I was saying I was having a really intense emotional soul pull to something else. So these things are no joke. They work with our entire being. They work with our soul, and they're why they are literally rooted. No matter what program Ashley and I are facilitating in, that is the root of them. The sacred community and the safety for the rest of the rites of passage to unfold so that you become more and more and more aware and in tune of here's the ego. Again, like I said, still happening, not the loudest voice. There's the soul. Whoa, that's undeniable. I'll pause there, Ashley, because I can tell there's more that you would like to say.
Everything you're saying is so great, and I'm working through the steps of step 1, step 2, trying to ensure that we are giving everyone clear guidelines. And these are such great points and so often overlooked, especially because, and I love that you said that, like we basically tell ourselves like, oh, I can do it myself. Oh, I'm fine on my own. I've been doing this on my own forever. And it's so true. When you're in the space of doing it on your own, you have to be kind of hyper vigilant of your surroundings and be running on old programmings. When you're in a space that you're safe, it's easier for you to crack open and witness and be witnessed in a deeper sense. So beautiful, so beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Yes. So when I think about how to begin to lead with your soul, this is the place to start. Is to start first connecting with your soul and understanding and hearing and being able to differentiate the difference between your ego and your soul. And now when it comes to actualizing it, okay, actualizing your purpose, this is like the next step. This is when we move out of our head and out of discovery mode and into the embodiment, the actualization of the expression, which is like the next level here, because the first step in discovering it is pretty scary, right? Because we often have, the reason why we don't know is more likely not the fact that you don't know, but more because there's stuff working within you that is creating a life's purpose amnesia that is then making you believe that you don't know, because it's much safer to not know than to know and have to take that next step. So much safer. And often this process is unconscious, and we wake up to it later and go, oh my God, actually, I felt this within me, and I did know. I did actually know a deeper sense of my purpose. But the idea of moving forward on it, just it totally put me in this life's purpose amnesia. Like the idea of that, gosh, yeah, definitely felt safer to just stay in the unknown than it is to step into like, okay, I do know, now what? Something I didn't share in my story, it took me 7 years to finally move out of the process of the mathematical equation and finally actually figuring out the depth of my purpose. And another 2 years of knowing the depth of my purpose, knowing it exactly before I actually took action on it. Because I had stories of fear, voice the ego. Who am I to do this? Why me? Oh, am I good enough? Do people really want to learn from me? Is this really valuable? Do I have the energy to do it? Do I have the capacity to do that? How is it even possible? Hear the stories of the ego? And those are just the thought loops. Don't get me started on the emotional experience or the energetic experience of that. The actualization of your purpose navigates a whole different terrain beyond the discovery, beyond the self-discovery process, but instead goes into this deeper depth of understanding the resistance and what's blocking you from walking the path of actualizing your purpose. And so this is why what we speak about, we don't even touch on purpose until halfway through Activate Your Life's Purpose, because the foundational work is imperative. Because if this stuff isn't in place and you haven't already been practicing witnessing your ego, witnessing your thought process, witnessing your emotions, and really becoming a master of your own reality, when you go and you finally channel in your purpose and you go to live it out, if you didn't do that work before, I promise you, you're going to be thrown every bit, every roadblock, every fear, everything is coming at you full force. And so when you prep yourself with this deep embodiment, deep knowing, and a deep systematic approach to your whole being, how you think, how you act, how you, your emotional body, your mental body, all of it, you're able to then be a witness to what's all coming up that's been keeping you from moving forward. Now, if you try to go and actualize it without that backing, it's like impossible. And you'll believe that everything outside of you is keeping you from that purpose, but really it's everything internally that's projecting outside of you that then is keeping you from your purpose. And so this backing of reprogramming the way that you are physically interacting with the world around you, energetically interacting with the world around you, mentally and emotionally functioning within your being, within your life, this is the foundation of living your purpose. Because your purpose isn't just doing something. It's who you are being. It's how you are being. It's how you are showing up for yourself. It's allowing yourself to be in joy and fulfillment. It's allowing yourself to listen and trust the voice of your ego or your soul over the voice of your ego. It's giving yourself this space between action and reaction, or response and moving forward. This is what's necessary and imperative to actualize your purpose. Because there is a big difference, and you may all have felt this already, between knowing and being. Knowing your purpose and actualizing it. Oh gosh, I know that my next step is, but man, why does this keep happening? Why is my still, like, every time it comes up, I'm having an actual response, like a trauma response to moving forward, or every time I move forward, this thing comes in, or I get really busy, or I get physically sick. This is our programming that's keeping us, the resistance that's keeping us safe, right? In the familiar. Because it feels safer to be in a space of discovering or trying to figure it out, or in the first steps, than to actually step on that path and commit to moving forward on it. And so we have to first feel safe in our body and have a community around us to feel safe in moving forward. So that when we get to that space, where we get to actually begin to take some action on it, we can feel empowered, we can feel confident, we can feel sure in ourselves, we can hear all the voices that are coming up in our head and our body and our experience, and know how to navigate that and feel empowered in taking our steps forward, knowing that no matter what is thrown in my path, I am clear, I am certain, I'm confident, and I know I can do this. I just channeled some ranting there, so your turn, Alissa.
No, it was so good. I think that's my favorite part of the whole training. Yeah, so I want to make a little bit of the distinction so you can just see, like, from mine and Ashley's stories, like how different this lived experience is. So, like, going from being sick and literally unable to be embodied, right? It would have been unwise, unsafe for me to be embodied. Working a job that was more like complacency than it was the stability my logical mind believed that it was. Having an external reality that absolutely did not match my internal, and more so made me feel pretty crazy, that amplified my imposter syndrome, that made me actually like self-sabotage and self-gaslight simply because those realities didn't match. And it's really important for those realities to match. And perpetuating that illness, that disorder, that chaos in my own body as a way to literally keep me dependent on the logic and the ego. Okay. That was not fulfilling. That felt pretty desperate. But the other choice still felt really scary, which was take the step to not be isolated. Like, what if I'm gaslit again? Invest the money. I feel like what if it doesn't come back to me? And what if I get sick again and I'll need to pay for another hospital stay or something like that? That was really scary. Validate myself and my crazy fucking empath thoughts? Like, no, that's too terrifying. Right? To now, like, woof, hard to not feel like I'm bragging, but to be able to like emotionally, energetically hold space for, I can't tell you how many people, to be able to go to grad school and not feel like I'm going to get sick and have to leave, and make the investment of grad school, like, whoa, that was bigger than the $100 I spent on Empowered Empath at the time. That felt really scary. I remember Ashley's like, it's only $100. I'm like, that's amazing. I can't do it. Right. Yeah. And now just trusting that that abundance will be there, because my body has had a lot of time and emphasis and effort creating the safety for it so that I'm able to do those things. So I can hear the ego, and still, no matter when it comes up, there's spaciousness within this system that was so dysregulated to just know, here's the ego. That's okay. Soul's going to come in and catch me. That was unfathomable. Unfathomable. Not logical for a girl that was in the hospital 5 times in 1 month. Okay. There are examples from our students and that took years. I want to say, like, Ashley, she's like, that took 7 years. Yeah, that took years. Well, the whole process took a while, but it didn't take 7 years because I wound up coming into community. And once I did, things worked really quickly. I wound up coming into safety. And once I did, things wound up coming online really quickly after I showed some conviction to it through the fear, trusting the soul. But like, for some of our students, there was a student the other day that I was baffled when she posted, like, you will always receive a return of investment, is what she posted. When she interviewed for Activate Your Life's Purpose, she said, I never see a return of investment. I'm exhausted. No matter how hard I work, never have I ever seen a return of investment in a program. That's why I'm so apprehensive to do this. So much fear. So much emphasis on productivity. Now she has a business that teaches people how to lean into ease. And her ideal is that she always receives the return of investment in 6 months of her being an AYLP and then the Purpose Accelerator program. So when you and we'll share Carlin's as well, which we actually are going to leave you all the video of Carlin, who I know had to leave, but we want you to be able to connect with it and resonate with it on your own time, because it's one of the most inspiring and impeccable ideals of conviction.
Authentic and genuine.
Authentic. Yeah, so it would be phenomenal for you to all connect with it on your own time after this. But to be able to do that in a way that catalyzes it, even if it took you a year, whoa, it's not 7 or 9 or whatever else it was, a lifetime, which I think is the ideal right now in the sort of like toxic spirituality we have of just perpetuating this idea of going it alone, of endlessly seeking, when it's really like we could create the container for it, and then we could remember it, and then we could be it. And these things are really accessible when we have the right resources and we are convicted to using them and stepping up into them, which is the resources that we talked about. Ashley.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the path of moving forward for somebody who's very much in their head to moving into their body is possible. Alissa and I are living proof. So if your ego's like, my story is different, it's not possible, mine's, I don't know, let me just call out your ego there. It's possible for you. It's possible for you. It's taking these small actions and reminding yourself to come back to you. It's giving yourself the space to be in a community where you feel safe and you feel held, where you can be witnessed, so that you can begin to learn how to reprogram the way that you lead your life. So you can move out of fear and ego and move into love and soul-led living. So you've heard us talk a bit about Activate Your Life's Purpose, and we are currently enrolling our 11th round of Activate Your Life's Purpose, a program that we have been speaking on that supports empaths in gaining clarity and confidence in their purpose, where they discover it and begin to live it out. The stats say, and Alissa kind of started this, as I was writing my story and just thinking about what to share here, and I realized that it took me 9 years. I looked back in the data of all the students that have gone through AYLP, and I found that it has taken 3 to 6 months. The data has shown it takes 3 to 6 months for our clients to begin to take action on their purpose. And so I was like, you know what? I'm pretty glad that it took me 9 years, because now it gets to take my students literally less than a year to start taking action on that and to know that and move on that. That's huge. That's huge. So I'll take 9 years if we can get more light workers out there living their purpose and making the impact that they're meant to make. So this program, that story of Carlin's is her story of the journey with AYLP. We have a whole lot more of those on YouTube. And if you go onto the website, you can see all the other stories and just expressions of gratitude from students from past rounds. This program is truly the perfect blend of psychology, neuroscience, behavioral science, or behavioral psychology, spirituality, channeling, shamanic journeying, just a perfect blend of the two worlds of science and spirituality coming together. Because we know, as you hear from our story, how hard it is to feel safe in just spirituality when you're undergoing a process that feels very foreign. So we include both sides. So it's easy for you to understand it here and feel comfortable moving into here. It's necessary to approach your purpose systematically, not just in here, not just in here. Yes, Alissa.
Yeah, I want to say this, a lot of folks come to us really cerebral, and Ashley and I were talking about this the other day of like, yes, our programs are very cerebral, and the only reason they are is to satiate this mechanism within us that is so reliant on the cerebral, so that we can move further into bringing the whole system online. It's literally to satiate that part of us that has to know, so that we can create more space for our whole being to tap in and come online and be in alignment with just the mind that wants to run the show. So there's a lot of the cerebral built in, but there's also this invitation to systemic reclamation. again, of the whole being on board for the process. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you for that. So I'm not going to go too much into the details. I will leave the website. Alissa, would you mind dropping the website to AYLP just to put it out there? So if you guys want to learn more about it, if you're feeling drawn to this, go ahead and check it out. I don't want to take up any more time speaking on it. Although, you know, I would love to talk all about all the details in the process of it and, you know, what clients are saying and what students have said about it. You guys can find that on the website. But what I want to open up space for are two things. One, I want to open up space for Q&A so we can support you more deeply. And two, I wanted to share with you an opportunity that is exclusive here. And in honor of enrollment for AYLP, I wanted to support you in feeling safe and taking the next step. I know that hearing about this process may feel scary. Your soul may be screaming yes, and your ego screaming, "Oh my God, I don't know, this sounds cool, but you know." So I want to make it easy. I want to make it easy for you and offer spaces in my calendar for free calls, free clarity calls. And the intention of these calls is to support you in identifying what the best next step is for you to move forward on your journey of your purpose. And in that, we'll see if Activate Your Life's Purpose is a good fit or not. And if it is, wonderful. I can tell you all about the program and how I feel like it may support you. If I don't feel like it's a good fit, I'm going to support you in finding and figuring out what your best next step is. Because I care more about you and your progress than about filling spots. Always have. What's special about Activate Your Life's Purpose is you're not just another number there. It's a small, intimate container where we handpick everyone that is in that space to ensure that the space is safe, that everyone vibes together, and that everyone actually is going to benefit the most from the space. Because that's trauma informed and we care more about the results than about numbers and money. We want to see change. We want to keep our stats high, right? We also want you to get out there and lead your purpose and start changing the lives that you're meant to be changing. So I'm going to be opening up 5 spots in my calendar for free clarity calls. I will drop the link to that. I actually have my application here for AYLP. I forgot to get my other link. So I'll have Alissa begin the Q&A, and then I'll drop that link in the comments for anyone that wants to claim one of those clarity calls.
So grab those clarity calls, y'all, because you literally get a life's purpose channel like at your side to facilitate just a moment in time for you to decide whatever your next step is, whether or not it's AYLP. And that's like a wild way to have it not be so scary because you're not investing and arguing the ego about whether or not it's logical, and having the opportunity to have a moment of community, right? Be validated in your process and reflect back to you what you're experiencing. Okay. Mentorship. Oh, start date of AYLP is enrollment ends the 19th. The opening ceremony is the 22nd. Okay. So we can open it up to mentorship. You can raise your hand or you can unmute your microphone. I think we're in a small enough group. Oh, Ashley, did you want them to just type it in the question box so we can go through it?
That may be quicker.
Yeah,
and then
I
if
think
we
it
need
actually,
clarity, if we want some like clarifying questions, we can just unmute and
yeah, I think
have
it
a
might actually
conversation.
be more intentional that way too, with just what we're able to give you as mentorship. So feel free to drop your questions or what you'd like mentorship on in the chat box, and I will start answering them. Ashley has a question on ashleydufresne.typeform.com. Just kidding. No one gets my dry sense of humor. It's fine. I know y'all have questions. I can't wait to answer them, whatever they may be. Maybe I'll just start answering with random facts about myself. I'm a Taurus, Scorpio moon, Capricorn rising. My favorite color is turquoise.
You're so funny.
Oh, My favorite thing to say to Forrest is it's part of my bit. Forrest is my partner, and even if I think I'm hilarious, I'll just be like, that's just part of my bit. If I can get one of the free clarity calls, how could I schedule one? You can go to that link right above where your comment is that says ashleydufresne.typeform.com and click on that to schedule.
That will be, it's the application for the purpose clarity calls. So just fill out the application. There are only 5 spots. So I'm going to pick, well, really most likely I'm going to channel, and my soul's going to pull me to call in and lead the 5. But yes, that is where to go to book a call. And I'm going to also drop that link in the email where I send the replay. So if you miss this, I'll send that, and I'll also put Carlin's video there, because I know that when we shut this down, that's probably going to go away too. So
Yeah.
In case you want to check that out and feel her soul, she's, I just love that. I just love her video.
Me too.
Thank you for that question.
Anybody else? You can literally ask us anything right now. I'm going to stay until somebody asks a question. This is my favorite part.
I know. I love the mentorship part.
I think it's been since we did, oh, there it is. I was going to say, Ashley, I think it's been like a year since we did our like cacao mentorship call. So this is rare. Okay, I'll read it. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 5, and it's caused a lot of roadblocks navigating through adulthood. At 30, I still struggle with financial management and simple tasks like doing the dishes. I recognize limiting beliefs, and I truly believe I can do anything I set my mind to. I have never felt called in a particular direction. It's more like multiple directions. And I'm so overwhelmed by options, I don't know where to start. The world is my oyster, but there are so many pearls, and I don't know where to start shucking. I love metaphor so much. Thank you. Some fears that came up are how I can start a business or be a wife or mother if I can't even take care of simple household chores or feed myself. Do you have any advice for someone with a learning disorder who struggles with motivation and focus? Ashley, I have a feeling that you've channeled on this.
I have, you're speaking to me. I too was diagnosed with ADD, but I think they just changed the label of it. And I also had learning disabilities, and actually am dyslexic, and had a really hard time learning and focusing and doing anything in school, which was nice with numbers because they didn't move, but letters, they would move. So I can relate deeply with that feeling of all of this, just feeling like just met with roadblocks and being distracted and like being pulled in every direction and having all of these passions and all of these opportunities and feeling like, okay, what one? And feeling overwhelmed by it all. I relate to you deeply in all of that, because yes, I relate deeply. And we hear a lot of our students actually share very similar, like very passionate, multi-passionate, are drawn in a lot of directions, overwhelm, very common themes. So some advice that I think actually you said it right here. The first step here is recognizing where these beliefs are creating these stories in your life. I loved that you said, I know that I am capable of. Where is that? That like just lit me up. You're like, I know that I am capable of, I believe that I can do anything I set my mind to. That truth right there. I'm sure it has already led you into so much beauty in your life. And let's amp this up. Let's make this the loudest truth. Let's make this the truth that is the most powerful, instead of the diagnosis. So the reason I actually went into clinical mental health is because I just totally hated that I was put in a box and put on a bunch of meds and told I was these certain things, and basically created my identity as a young human of who I am based off of disorders or diagnoses. And I wanted to rebel against that and break it and open up and do some holistic healing or holistic psychology. And that's what led me into art therapy. And learning more about it, of course, going to school about psychology, I actually learned the power of understanding the diagnosis and why that exists. And it's completely different than like how we're taught in like what happens when we're in the doctor's office and we're given that diagnosis. The doctor is thinking, oh, great, I know what it is, and here's this checkbox and how to help you. when we hear it, we hear, oh, here's your problem, here's some medicine, and we aren't given solutions. And we just feel like we're broken, and it becomes part of our identity. And so from what I'm hearing in your story, you've already have experienced how this has become part of your identity, and how the voice of the ego has already trying to prepare you and protect you from failures because of the struggles that you've had in your past, right? And so the invitation here is to break out of of how that diagnosis has created an identity for you, and stories on how you exist, and give yourself permission to see the beauty in this gift. Because I really genuinely believe that every diagnosis, there's actually a massive gift there, but we're only taught about the shadow side. But when we lean into it, we begin to open up the realm of the light that comes with that diagnosis. Because this diagnosis, these different ways that the brain functions, there are different ways that the brain is functioning than the average human. These are gifts. When not honed, we see the shadow, but when honed, we see the beauty. And you actually displayed some of it here, multi-passionate, overwhelmed with options, all of this excitement and like this passion in all of these different areas. Like, this is a part of your gifts. So, and how can you introduce and bring more of this light, and begin to invite in the path of seeing the gifts and the light of this diagnosis, and see how we can maybe navigate and work with the shadows with more compassion and less judgment? I know, Alissa, you have a lot more to say on that end.
Some of that in, yeah. One of my favorite things to do are rebrands, and there are a lot that are ready to go in here. One of them being, I'm gonna be in the realm of clinical mental health, and diagnostics is not my preference, but I think it's important to understand and honor. So I appreciate you bringing this forward. What I want to say about diagnostics is that it is created to try to compartmentalize those aspects of ourselves that are only maladaptive to our current paradigm, our current colonized world. Okay, so they may seem really, really problematic in the terms of normal conventional society. However, like Ashley said, there's a lot of strength to being multi-passionate, to pivoting quickly, which is actually becoming more and more necessary in the new paradigm, is pivoting quickly, which is the superpower of someone who's been diagnosed ADHD. And in building momentum after something that really sparks your interest. And so it's only maladaptive to this current paradigm, which may mean that a big part of bringing compassion is that understanding that you may be developing a new way of working. I know Ashley has done a lot of things in her own business to adapt to her unique way of working, which looks like relying on others, which looks like setting her schedule a certain way that works for her specifically, right? That looks like outsourcing certain things that were problematic for dyslexia initially. Like, I used to do Ashley's copyright because of dyslexia. It's one of the reasons why I'm like, read the things in the chat box, right? So it's working to your own paradigm. It's working to your own strengths. And there was one other thing, one rebrand that I hope might resonate with you, and you can set it your own way. But I love this that you said, and you claimed, like Ashley said, I truly believe I can do anything I set my mind to, but the mind may have been really stigmatized for you. So can you do anything you set your soul to? Can you do anything you set your being to? How can we step away from this continuous, like, I could do anything I set my mind to, but my mind is flawed, right? And still having that deep story under there. So these rebrands are really important because they're higher truth than these narratives that continuously run on the rules of a broken system, of a broken paradigm that we're all here to usher in the new paradigm that seeps through the cracks of the old. That's all I want to say on that. Thank you for bringing this up. I have to say I have really similar stories around like being a sick girl, and had a lot to come through with being able to accomplish everything too. So a lot of rebrands have had to happen there, that we truly believe in, right? They're not just affirmations that we desperately want to know. That's something we teach in AYLP. That doesn't work. It's something that you truly believe in, that's reconfigured to your highest truth, that you can repeat back to yourself in that lens of compassion. Okay. All right. You're welcome, Catherine. Okay. The next question, I was wondering why your group or community. I asked because I've been a part of a couple, but when I say my accomplishments or rough patches may be to get there, but still completing them. And I'm lucky if I even get a comment majority of the time. So because of this, I have felt maybe I need to do it alone, or now I keep telling myself I need the support. But I have had to tell myself I don't, because needing the support has been more difficult than just wanting the support, but knowing I don't need it. So I would say, first of all, jump on a purpose clarity call with Ashley, because we're never going to convince you that this is the group for you, ever. Your soul is the one that has to undergo the rites of passage to decide that this is the community or group for you. I will say it sounds like this, that you've entered into spaces that maybe were too large, or too distracting from the amount of like great care that you need, and reflection and validation, and that AYLP is a small group for a reason, that you have support and reflection to you every single individual 5 days a week. From me, I'm coming in every day reflecting to anyone who needs it, as well as we talk a lot about culture and community, of everyone has a responsibility to their community. Jenny's nodding their head because she knows. They have anyone who is a cohort with you has a responsibility to reflect back to you, because they expect the same from you. And so there is no, unless you don't show up, unless it's that there are stories around repelling support, which we would probably reflect back to you too. The only way you could not be noticed or supported constantly would be by not showing up and ghosting the situation. But I think that this would be a really quality opportunity for you to jump on a call with Ashley if that's something that you're interested in. Ashley, do you have anything more?
No, you said it really well. Yeah, no, you said it really, I wouldn't add anything to that.
Yeah, we have a structure where, again, our emphasis is on community and culture. You know, it's not just a group because it's convenient for Ashley and I. It's a group in that way that the rites of passage is built in, and the way that you're checking in, and the way that others are reflecting to you, and the way that we hold the opening ceremony, and in the way that we only let so many students in at a time. So it's just not possible to not be seen unless you're not showing up.
I actually used to run AYLP one-on-one before I did group, and the students actually asked me, like, hey, I know that people are doing this. They're like, can we do this together? And I'm like, yeah, you should be doing it together. I just thought. And very soon it was happening. I was like, I know rites of passage. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
Thought that one-on-one was more valuable. In all actuality, in this setting, group is more valuable.
Yeah,
and with one-on-one support.
The contest. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I feel overwhelmed often and pulled in many directions, and always feel like I'm ready to start on a path to serve my purpose. We've heard this before. That's all I want to say. This is really relatable. But something always comes up, such as health issues. Hi, hello, my name is Alissa. Have you met me? I then feel a lot of anxiety and I need to shut down. I have such a desire to live my purpose in a more fulfilling way. I'm extremely anxious to take the step to change, but feel that I keep coming back to a deep feeling that there is so much more to my life, and maybe how I might be able to help others. I want to reflect back to you how you wrote this around health issues will come up. I'll experience anxiety and also this deep feeling, which are all of these things that we touched on, right? The block, the somewhat like neurosis, the spiral of the ego, but still having that visceral calling that keeps coming back and back and back, but is really easily argued and distracted by the illness, by the anxiety, right? Voice of the soul voice of the ego. These things work, like we know things about them. Like as human beings, we've studied these things for so long that we can rely on this sort of like, there's nuance to it, but there are some formulas, some repetitions, some patterns that we all share around ego and soul. One of those things is that you can trust the soul, right? You can trust the soul. That's innately true for all of us. So I want to thank you for naming this, because this is like what you said is true to your experience, but this is like a channeled collective thing that happens, right? You're speaking to a really innate human experience, and especially specifically to like the folks that are on this path. There is going to be all that scary that comes up. One of my favorite, just to quote myself, one of my favorite things to say and to believe in is that, okay, science says that to every force, there is an equal and opposing force. So that means what I have to offer must be powerful as fuck, because there's a whole lot of opposing force trying to keep me from it. And that soul just keeps showing up and up and up, right? It's still here, still here. Thanks for letting me drop my own quote. But that's how I feel about it. Ashley.
Such a good quote. So true. It's so true. That's what a great reminder, like of the great resistance you have. This means that like what's coming through has got to be equally as great. What I want to say to this is, well, thank you for sharing this. And also, I like that Alissa said, like, you can listen to your soul, and clearly you are. You know, the fact that you shared this here and then even ended it with, and I know that there's so much more. And I know that, you know, how I'll be able to help people. You know. So what's your next step? Your next step is navigating the ego and crossing that edge. Taking that first initial step into following the calling of your soul.
Yeah.
Small step. Small.
Yeah.
But it will build momentum.
Maybe allowing yourself the space and the help and the resources to be able to navigate all that, because you can't do it by yourself. But oof, how? Like it just doesn't. It feels like sickness sometimes. It feels like anxiety, and it feels like isolation. And like you said, right? I'm here to help others. I'm here to help others. You can't do that in isolation. So how can you actualize it in isolation? Right? I think it's really hard for us to allow ourselves like an intentional space to do that thing, because we're like, I do it a little bit every day, you know, I feel it when it comes up, I work through it. But like to allow ourselves that catalyzing, like Ashley said, that like magnetizing and thing that grows and grows and grows exponentially, to allow ourselves that kind of space can be really scary.
Mm-hmm. It's the number one thing I see keeping, you know, you're so used to doing things alone. We're so used to doing things alone. Oh, I already healed myself this much. I've been on this journey for so long. Why can't I do this thing? Of course I'll do this thing alone. It's the next level of your expression. You know, it's stepping out of survival mode and into thriving, which requires you to do things you've never done before. Things differently. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing.
Also, it's great to thank that little voice, that visceral feeling that keeps showing up. Thank you for continuing to show up, no matter how many times I'm anxious, no matter how many times I feel sick. Thank you for keeping me showing up. That helps. Okay. That's all the questions in the chat box. These were wonderful.
Last call for questions. Anyone else?
Last call for questions. If you resonated with this, or if you just need the energy again in storytelling of what's possible in building that new frequency for yourself, watch Carlin's video. Just watch it and understanding what is possible, because it's an incredible transformation, and you will feel it the moment you hit play. And then other than that, purpose clarity calls are up for grabs, and AYLP starts next week if you are interested. I don't think anybody else is posing questions. Next week enrollment ends next Friday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason that we chose Carlin's is, yes, it's so authentic and genuine and like just so heartfelt, but also what was channeled in from when I channeled in the collective of students coming into AYLP was this theme around moving out of the cerebral and into the embodied experience of their purpose. And what's unique about Carlin's story, and I got permission from Carlin to share this, and that's why we're even saying her name, because we already talked to her ahead of time, and she said she'd be more than happy to, be an inspiration and share. What's great about Carlin's story is she came from a background of her career was very logical, very ego driven, the way she has been thinking, very logical, and her process of moving into what she is doing now really took her this continuous step back to remind herself of what she wants more deeply beyond logic, and to follow that inner calling. And the transformation that she has made through AYLP and in the Purpose Accelerator now is just, she really is such an inspiration, because she's been able to move things beyond. She's been able to, when I remember when she was in AYLP, she's like, should I talk about this kind of stuff? Because all my friends are really logical. And we're like, definitely, I'm inspiring. Like, you're really showing people like what's possible. The fact that you're combining these worlds, and now she's like so openly, freely speaking, and her community resonates with her so deeply because she has been authentically showing up and really including everyone in her journey of navigating the voice of the ego and fear and stepping into a soul-led life and running her business doing so. So yeah, that is one of the main reasons that channeled in that Carlin's video is going to really resonate deeply with the souls that are aligned with this collective of AYLP. She's why I signed up in the last round. Yeah, she's amazing. And so are you. Amazing people attract amazing people. Allie, thank you both for this training. Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening and being here. I'm so excited to hold space for you and for you to be in this next collective AYLP. Thank you very much for hosting and sharing. Thank you. Thanks for being here and sharing too.
All right, y'all. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, Jenny, it's really good to be with you. It's so nice to see familiar faces and to witness you continuing to show up to the work.
Seeing you totally lit me up. I was like,
yeah, I know. And Carlin too. I was like, oh, you're here. And Michelle was here for a while. Oh, Michelle's still here. You guys have your cameras off. It's so good to see you all. Thank you all so much. Reach out.
Yeah, claim one of those spots. There's only 5. That's all I could energetically do to honor my energy and honor you. So claim them. I think there was 50 people that signed up. So I know that those that you guys hear now have first dibs. When I send out the replay, that will go out to everyone as well.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank y'all. Have a wonderful evening or morning. I don't know where you are.